right, guys, welcome back to another live show. Hopefully, everyone is doing good. We are continuing the native misconception of Bigfoot and have an awesome guest today, Mr. Ryan Paul Tremblay. And he's been talking and working on the same sort of stuff we've been talking about the last 3 weeks now. So let's bring him on the show. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going pretty good. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. I'm glad my alarm woke me up for this one because I had put the boy to bed and it was a little hard. So
I bet.
Yeah, it's that age. Four is a good fun age.
I'm getting there, man. I'm getting there.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. So how did you get into all the Bigfoot, cryptids, and the Native American side of things?
Well, as far as like Bigfoot and cryptids go, I was always a monster kid. You know, when I was growing up, my dad would show me the Hammer films and Universal Studios monsters. And of course, I got into Godzilla and Gamera. And of course, that just gravitated me towards all monsters, and then my dad showed me the Patterson-Gimlin film when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I was just instantly hooked into Bigfoot right away. And I was like, oh my God. Because, when you're a monster kid and you love monsters that much and somebody says, oh, well, there's something like that out in the real world, you're kind of going, yes, you get excited about it. So I started looking into Bigfoot, Jersey Devil, all this other stuff. And it just, it hooked me, man. It became my life's work.
I feel that very much so. And so how did you get into the Native American aspect in the stories, and what are your findings about some of this, misconception of, there's Bigfoot in all Native American tribes and stories?
Right.
And
well, that's actually what got me into it initially was, as I was reading about Bigfoot, I was seeing all these different names in these books, from all the different tribes. And I'm going, wow, all these tribes had them. So there has to be something to it. But then when YouTube came along and TikTok, I started noticing they were using names that weren't Bigfoot. And I'm kind of going, wait a minute, they're not talking about Bigfoot here. Why are you guys calling it Bigfoot? So I kind of made it my purpose to really look into that, to kind of bring to the people, no, this is what they were talking about. They're not talking about Bigfoot. This is something else. And we have to respect those traditions. We have to respect that lore and those legends and tell them as a native people told it. We can't, as I call it, whitewash it and make it what we want it to be. We have to tell it how they told it.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's pretty much what happens if you look at all the lists and stuff that are usually put out by the most popular people and stuff. Like you said, a lot of those names don't really correlate to what I guess we would have called Bigfoot and stuff. And why don't you get into some of that and some of those names, and how come they don't fit that Bigfoot narrative that a lot of Bigfooters try to, fit it into?
Okay. I mean, like the one that caught my attention, like right away, Blake, was the Rougarou. Okay. I saw that on a list of Bigfoot names. I'm going, well, wait a minute. Rougarou is a French term. It's not a Native American term, and they don't apply it to Bigfoot. That's usually, the spiritual werewolf kind of entity that they believe in Louisiana. So I started looking into that, and I noticed more stuff like Zuniqua. That's always talked about as being an ogress, a basket ogress that goes around kidnapping children. So I was kind of going, wow, there's a really big mistranslation here. There's a big misinterpretation. And same with the Genosqua. A lot of people like to talk about Genosqua and say, oh, it's this kind of Bigfoot. But that's not what the Iroquois were talking about. They had their own name for Bigfoot. So the Iroquois thing was Otne Yarhe, okay? And that meant stonish coat. Genosqua, on the other hand, meant stone giant. So you can see where people were kind of confusing it, where there was an overlap of some sorts, but they were just blending them all together. And I just kind of felt that was really inappropriate to do.
Yeah, and I think some of that is, when colonists came over and they were writing these stories down and they didn't have words to translate that well. That's why I think the word ogre comes up a lot, because I think that's, I would assume, a colonial term translated with Native Americans were trying to describe what they were talking about. I just like your post you sent with the Gugway and stuff like that.
Right. Well, like in the case of the Rougarou, what that was is it was that tribe. They were mispronouncing the French word of loup-garou. So when they would say it, it would come out sounding like Rougarou. So that's where that whole confusion stemmed from in that case.
Yeah, and then the stories of French werewolves and the Cree and Anishinaabe legends of the Wendigo would kind of get mixed.
Yep. Oh yeah. And, yeah, big time.
So if people come out and say, well, no, I've heard stories about the Rougarou and the Dog Man and stuff, and it's old Native American legends, is it pretty much saying that it's that name and all that stuff's kind of made up? And where is like the old stories about Dog Man? And because a lot of shows
that's
and
a
stuff,
great
they
question.
try to point to, oh, there's Native American stories of Dog Man and like skinwalkers and but if you talk about skinwalkers, it's only relatively small tribal areas and not spread out through the whole American continent or North American continent.
Well, when you look into Dogman, there's not really stories of Dogman per se. There's Dogman-like creatures. Like in the case of the Cherokee, they have the Ulanga Dolaga. Okay. Now, it has the head of a wolf, but when you look at how it moves like a Wolverine, and it can move with the fog. So it's like it's a spiritual thing. In fact, the name actually means spirit with knife teeth. Okay, so everybody's going, oh, that's a Dogman, that's a Dogman. No, it isn't. It's a spirit from Cherokee belief, and people got to learn to differentiate the two and separate them. They can't just go, oh, well, it looks like a wolf, hence it's a Dogman. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. That's not how tradition and folklore really works.
Yeah, because when you dive into the stories about cannibal giants or gugways or buckwas or all these other names that are usually thrown in Bigfoot, they have details like they're a ghost entity that lives in an invisible house in the woods, right?
Yes.
But supposedly that name is associated with Bigfoot. But if you look at the details, it's describing ghostly entities or spiritual guardians, or some of those stone giants from the Iroquois. Stonecoats were like golems with magical jewels and stuff in them.
Right, exactly. And I'm so glad you mentioned the Bukwas, because those they were hairy beings, all right, hairy hominids, but they were skeletal, and they would tempt people with the ghost food, and they would always try to drown them. So it was a spirit that was associated with water. It wasn't Bigfoot. So I don't know where people get so confused where they just skim over the details. I think that's really wrong to do.
Yeah, exactly. I think it comes from, I think they have tribal masks and some dances where the Buckwas, and they are, hairy covered humanoids, and their masks look Bigfoot-like, right? But of course, like you said, they're pretty much like ghost entities, and they trick people to drown them. And in some stories, they live in an invisible house. The spirits of the drowned victims like congregate at their house, and sometimes they take them to the other side and stuff. So there's it's fascinating. So why do modern researchers and old school researchers take these names and maybe turn the cheek to some of these details and say, well, that's just a misinterpretation? Like there's a famous Stone Nose story that's in Kathy Strain's book, and of course, Stone Nose, his nose comes out like Pinocchio and kills people, and for some reason, it's like, well, the Indians didn't understand and they were looking at it wrong. And why do you think some researchers do that?
I think it's, to them, it confirms their belief. Like, if you have a Bigfoot researcher and there's a creature that's, resembling Bigfoot in the native folklore, that kind of makes them go, oh, see, they were talking about it. This proves that what I'm talking about existed way back when, and it was a real thing. But again, that's not how they should do it. They have to look at the detail. The devil is in the details. Okay, so if you're reading about something like, for instance, the Zunaqua, okay, you can't sit there and go, oh, well, it was a Bigfoot that was stealing kids, because if that were the case, so every Bigfoot that's a Zunaqua is a female, because a Zunaqua was a female. It was a basket ogress. So you can't just detract details and make it what you want to be. That's cherry picking, and that's molding it to fit your belief.
Yeah, well, and then of course they say, well, it was a giant, and it's hairy. There's small details, and a giant, ogre. What are the sizes of some of these creatures that are described as being a giant or ogress that are used for Bigfoot names and stuff. Are they
Oh man,
Bigfoot
some
size
of
or are
them,
they?
yeah, some of them they'll say they're 20 to 30 feet, whereas in like the basket ogress, she's higher than the tallest pine trees, which is 150 feet. So that's not Bigfoot. That's a giant. That's a literal giant.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously they're just describing something completely different when they're 20, 30, 150 feet, 200 feet
Right.
tall.
Exactly.
Uh, what about some of these stories of like the Gugway story that you sent me? And I actually read it on here a couple weeks back of them taking the kids and stuff and then using fire. And I believe he had a separate type of home or teepee or using native technology and stuff. And now I've heard it say, well, it was just a way to describe the times of that era. And the Bigfoot was using, native technology at the time. And it wasn't really supposed to represent Bigfoot, but more of an Indian perspective, personality to the creature.
Right. Well, you have to look into the whole term. The term Gugwe is derived from the Gugao. Okay. And like you said, it's a basket ogress, but in some variations, she was a sea-dwelling giant. She didn't live in the teepee. She lived under the ocean. She lived in the lakes. And sometimes she would transform into a boulder. And that's how she would trick people that were walking by, because she'd be a boulder and then turn into her giant form and snatch the kids up as they were walking by. And that's why I said, you have to look at the details. You have to dig very, very deep. You got to scratch beneath the surface, and you have to see what that name meant and, where it came from and what the depictions were like. Because even though it might look like something you want to believe in at first, you might find out it's not actually what you think.
And a lot of tribes had very similar stories of the ogress or the red woman, and they called different names and stuff, but they usually described the same, very similar things.
Yeah.
And so, obviously they're encountering the same thing, and they're not saying it, different details and sizes and all this, but describing the very similar details of a ogre woman or a red woman who has a basket, kidnaps people, and she's 30 to 150 feet tall. I think it's very fascinating and stuff. And at the same time, they have stories of little people. And of course, those names get thrown into the Bigfoot name because, well, sometimes these little people are hairy, and
like the pug
little hairy Bigfoot. They're obviously juvenile Bigfoots and stuff. We're not encountering a lot of these other creatures and stuff, and I think that's probably why everything gets lumped into Bigfoot, because it seems to be the only thing that is left over.
Yeah, there's people that will say that Wendigo and Bigfoot are one and the same. And, I always tell them, no, because the Wendigo itself, it's an entity, it's a spirit that takes over somebody either through breaking taboos or being cursed. Bigfoot's not like that.
Exactly. And it's actually, how easy is it to find Bigfoot stories in Native American culture? Because it's supposed to be everywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, though. It's really not in every single story. There's certain tribes that do have things that make you go, well, maybe. But when you read into more of the details, you kind of go, okay, that's not a Bigfoot. This is something else. Like the Lakota have Cheatanka. Okay. Now, I do believe that, yes, that is a Bigfoot. But when you look at other things, like, like we said, the Bukwas, that's not Bigfoot. We have to look into that and really examine the stories, look at the way they portrayed them, look at the behavior. Chances are you're going to find that's not a Bigfoot. I just wanted it to be.
Yeah, and I think I've done this some of these times too. Is read some of these stories, and they're talking about cannibal giants, or we hear about the Lovelock Cave giants and stuff.
Right.
Well, when you hear giants and stuff, the only giant we have is Bigfoot. So they must be the same thing. Do you think in some of those stories where we're talking about cannibal giants, and it's not descriptive on sizes, or like the Lovelock Cave where you have giants, and they said they were eating the Paiute and stuff, and they pushed him in the cave. Of course, when modern archaeologists have looked at that, they found modern like duck and traps and different Native American tools in the same cave that they were burnt in. What's your opinion on all of that?
I honestly think that when they ran into something like that they were actually encountering possibly the Norse people, because Norse people are very, very tall. They were very well-built people back in the day. And when you stop and think about it, if they were foreign to you and you hadn't seen them before, and you saw how tall they were, to you, that's going to be a giant. Okay. And the Norse did practice cannibalism for a while. So if they were raiding villages, taking people to eat, it's a possible solution there that it was Norse people they were seeing, not these big, Titan-sized kaiju giants.
Right, because not all of the cannibal giants are described as like 150-foot tall pine tall,
right,
as like the Red Woman and Basket Ogress. Sometimes these giants are just 6 foot, 7 foot, barely.
With red hair.
We have there's red hair giants and like black hair giants. What are do you have some stories about that and how maybe it's different than Bigfoot and why they're possibly not Bigfoot?
Well, I mean, I think it could be, adventurers or explorers from different countries, because to the tribes, they're going to seem alien. Okay. So black hair, red hair, they're going to label them as giants, especially if they're very aggressive. They're going to be like, oh, they're cannibalistic. They're man-eating, so I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah. And there were definitely Europeans that were coming over here, and Chinese were coming over here. I think they found Roman artifacts over here. Practically seems like almost everyone was trying to come over here. And
oh yeah, you had the Spanish and everything. So I think they were seeing these people and going, oh well, they don't belong here. They didn't originate here, so they must be giants.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that, and there's other stuff going on, and it's just in Bigfoot stuff. But Bigfoot is actually pretty hard to find in Native American stores. Like a lot of tribes don't really come out and say, "Oh yeah, these are Bigfoot, and this is Bigfoot, and we believe this is Bigfoot." What I'm finding is a lot of stories that I read when I was younger and doing into this are really hard to find. No longer, the websites are no longer up. But I remember reading stories of an Alaskan old woman who saved a Bigfoot. I think he was either trapped or he was dying. She nursed him back to health, and he spoke to her in her language and said, "If you come back to the stump where you found me, I will give you food every full moon.
Right.
Until the day that I don't come and show up with food, then you'll know that I passed." After a couple of years, of course, she showed up. There was no food, and she had known that he had passed on. I remember reading that back when I was younger and stuff. I'm having trouble finding that story. Have you heard of that story? Have you heard of other stories where they do come out with Bigfoot? Because I'm finding it really harder now than I remember back in the day. But maybe I'm trying to, I have a little bit scientific, a little bit shorter, smaller lens to look through. And
right, I haven't heard that story, but I do remember a story somewhere where it was up in Alaska where they found a dead alleged Bigfoot. And they showed proper respect by burying the baby. And, they found it floating down a river. It was already dead. So they showed it the proper respect by building a casket, and they actually buried it in a cemetery. And the medicine man, the chieftain of that tribe, went to go meet with these Bigfoot, and they demanded that body back. And they told them, either you give us a body back or there's going to be war. So what he did is he showed them where it was buried. And because there was such respect shown, they called off that war. So that's a really sentimental story. I don't know if that was really Bigfoot or if there was, some other kind of tall human being that they, kind of intruded upon, but I suppose anything's possible.
Yeah, you have stories like bush Indians, which are just a giant version of Indians sometimes, or sometimes referred as Bigfoot. And it's pretty hard to find tribes that are saying Bigfoot, but there are of the Anishinaabe tribes of the Ojibwe, Potawatomi and stuff. They are saying of their 7 grandfather teachings, the teaching of honesty was told to them by Sabe or Gichi-Sabe, which is a giant known as Bigfoot. And a lot of modern elders are saying, yeah, this is Bigfoot. And of course, he gave the teaching of honesty to a little boy who gave pretty much they're like the 7 grandfather teachings. So they're like the opposite of the 7 sins and stuff to bestow upon the people. And they're one of the only tribes that flat out say this is Bigfoot, and he gave this information to us. And but there's hardly any other references or stories coming from all those tribes about Bigfoot. And
I mean, it's very
stories that are not being told, obviously.
It's very difficult to come across anything like that. People think you can just open a book and find the folklore and it'll be like, referencing Bigfoot. It's not like that at all. It's actually really, really difficult to come by any stories that are mentioning specifically Bigfoot. Most of the time it's a spiritual kind of entity that they're talking about, or some kind of, even a deity, some kind of god that came down and it did this and then it went back up to the heavens or whatever. They're not talking about Bigfoot all the time, and people really need to look into that and read the whole thing, speak to people from the tribes and see what they mean, get their interpretation of it. Our interpretation shouldn't be too important. It should be their interpretation, see what they mean.
Exactly. And there's a lot of transformers, tricksters, shapeshifters, and all sorts of things that, and that is really, muddled into everything, because you get into the woo side, the dogman side, they're shape-shifting and they're doing all sorts of all the woo, and it, maybe it makes a little bit more sense to people when they hear the Native American spiritual side and spiritual guardians and stuff. But what is your take on the modern Bigfoot? What do you think it is? Flesh and blood, spiritual? What's your perspective on it?
I used to be solely and strictly in the camp of flesh and blood, but the more I look into stuff and the more I talk to eyewitnesses, the more I have to lean towards both. Maybe they're interdimensional. Maybe they come from a different place, and when they're here, they're solid, they're flesh and blood. But when they pop back over to wherever they came from, they're whatever they want to be. That would explain why we don't find the bodies. Okay, we don't find the infants that are wounded or whatever. It might even explain the, how we find one footprint at a time, because it makes a print and then poof, disappears. So I'm open-minded. I want to believe it's flesh and blood, that it's something that started here, that we're just going to find one day. But I have to also kind of think, well, there's a possibility it's interdimensional. That's a spirit.
Yeah, I definitely more of the flesh and blood thing, because I'm trying to, until I visually see it and experience it, then I will be swayed. But the more and more I read about Native American stories, and the one I'm going to reference here in a minute, and my own experiences of, how they get away and some odd things out in the woods, I am open-minded that there's more to the story than, the basic Bigfoot, which is
right.
It's very odd, like why such a secret if it's just like a flesh and blood ape type of humanoid who's smart, or
right. And why is it so hard to track
tribal Bigfoot?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Speaking of trying to find Bigfoot stories and books, and I actually came across I don't have it pulled up, but I guess I should probably pull it up. I have it's called the Grandfather Book, and it's a Ojibwe book. And I was doing other, looking for Bigfoot stuff, and I got sidetracked and was reading some Anishinaabe, which is the whole old tribe. But the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, the Ottawa, the Cree, the Algonquin, there's a couple of other ones that are into that. But the Grandfather Book was talking about all the major stories of the Anishinaabe, and one of them, they were talking about their hero, Nano-Jabo or Wano-Jabo, a couple different spellings, but he travels across America searching for his father. He ends up going to the Redwoods and encountering a Bugajewinian, which is a wild man who comes out and is a Bigfoot. And in the book, the Bugajewinian is talking, and they're giving quotes of what he's talking about. He gives future, he talks about, there will be people coming after you, and he talks about his people being they will be a different people. They will live in the woods. They won't congregate and stuff like that. And I found it very fascinating that they're talking about Bigfoot and their stories that are hundreds to, I believe, thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, creation stories about Bigfoot talking to the, this cultural hero, and how it's more it's almost as relevant now in the modern times with our research than it's in this little book, and this this tribal stories that's been passed down for thousands of years. And it's like, it's almost like information that it's not as important to them as like the Bigfoot community finds it. It's like, what is this gold little nugget in the middle of the book? And they're like, oh yeah, that's just the Bugajewinian that talked to Nano-Jabo and told him some information. And of course it's on the journey. It's one little tiny part of a whole story of what this
Right.
hero's doing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
one of those that it's not plastered in your face, and it's not talked
Well,
about in our community
I
and
think
stuff.
with them though, Blake, I think like, you know, Bigfoot is kind of alien to us, okay? Because, you know, we live in the cities
Mhm.
and we have, you know, those hectic lives where we're working 9 to 5 jobs. With them though, their people started out, you know, thousands of years ago, and they lived on the land, lived off the land. And, you know, crossing Bigfoot's path was probably an everyday occurrence for them. So to them, it's like, oh, it's nothing new. You know, they've always been there. Why are you guys so surprised?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. It's like this little. I'm gonna bring it up and stuff. I should have already had it pulled up,
Yeah.
but um, and I remember there's a tribe in the plains. I can't remember exactly. I've been having trouble finding it. Where they believe sightings of Bigfoot is like a indication of like the end times coming, or the change of time and stuff coming. Have you heard
Yeah.
of that? Do you know what tribe that comes from?
That's partially a Choctaw belief.
Okay,
But there is another tribe that does believe the same thing too, that the more you're seeing Bigfoot, the closer we are to the end of days.
right. And those are northern plain tribes, or the plain tribes
Yep.
that are speaking
Northern
about
Plain.
that.
Yep.
And that's very fascinating stuff too. You know, I don't know how religious you are, but you know, the world is pretty crazy, you know, right now, and some of that stuff fits the bill a little bit, I think. And
Yeah,
we
it
are
does.
seeing Bigfoot more and more and more and more, and it kind of makes me wonder, because you know I'm out there chasing the thing, and I've had so many weird experiences, and it's still, you know, just out of reach. So it's just out
Hmm.
of reach. And it's kind of like, you know, I don't know if you've ghost hunted, paranormal stuff,
Oh
but you
yeah,
know, it's always
absolutely.
just out of reach. You encounter some of the same weird stuff. You know, some people
Yes.
think they're all the same thing. You know, it's all the high strangeness, it's all the same thing. Or some people think they're demons and aliens. And you know, what's your perspective on some of the Native American stories, and like the Nephilim, like Nephilim giants and six-figure digits, and some of the natives talk about six-figure digits, giants. When you read some
Mhm.
of the stories of the,
Well, I'm
do you
always
think they're
reluctant to
similar? Do you think
say
they're different? What's your thought on that?
I'm always reluctant to say it's Nephilim because when you really look back at the beliefs of the
Right.
tribes, you know, Christianity and Catholicism, it wasn't always there. That didn't happen until the European settlers came over and all these other settlers came over and introduced a very foreign concept of Christianity and Catholicism. So I think they were seeing something that they just, you know, kind of misinterpreted in a way, you know, and I don't think they ever really called them Nephilim though. I think they believed they were actually, you know, spiritual things that came over from a different plane. So, but I do think there's truth to them, though. You know, if I hear something like that from a tribal member, I'm more inclined to believe him than I am almost anyone else.
Exactly. Um, yeah, I don't think they're like what I was kind of coming at is like, you know, they have very similar. You read the Nephilim stuff, you know, they're spiritual entities. Of course, when they died, they're some people think that when those things died, their spirits stayed here. They became demons and demonic entities, and it gets a big rabbit hole. But
Oh yeah.
some people say that the Native Americans were just encountering these creatures and things over here, but these were they were calling them cannibal giants. They were calling them, you know, the basket women who were 150 feet tall, 250 feet tall, which matches some of these Nephilim giants who were a
Right.
lot taller than Bigfoot, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
who are also spiritual and stuff like that. And they talked about like the Wendigo is a spiritual, evil spiritual entity who literally possesses you. It turns you into a Wendigo cannibal monster. I mean,
Man, that
that's some
is so
spiritual
misinterpreted
stuff.
by people.
I mean, you know, and it's like sometimes I wonder if they're talking about the same kind of entities. And you know, I'm kind of a Christian and stuff, so I do kind of believe that there's things out there. I've encountered weird stuff. I've experienced stuff that I would say is leaning towards the bad side of things that I can't
Oh yeah.
explain.
I think we
Do
all
you,
have. I
so
think when we go out
yeah.
to investigate, we all kind of run into those things that we're going, oh, that's not good. I'm getting that bad vibe from it, so I'm out of here. I've had moments like that.
Do you think it's you know, everything is connected, or do you think there's like separate little things and stuff, because I think they're separate little things, but the more I'm encountering the weird stuff that I can't explain and everything is doing the same sort of thing, it really makes me wonder, is like, how much is connected?
Yeah, I used to be like you. I used to want to believe that everything was separate, that it was its own thing, but I don't know, man. I think things are more connected than we realize. I really do. And I think the more we research, the more we're going to find out, and the more we're going to see that, yeah, there's a connection to it all.
I'm leaning on the fence, and I'm kind of looking on the other side, and I do see connections and stuff. There are weird connections in this paranormal fields that are not explored and not really explained a lot. We're all our separate categories, and I'm going to pull up this book right here, actually.
Yeah, please do.
We're going to take a look at this.
Ashley made a good point too, though, in comments.
Right here.
I
always find it odd. So a lot of people use the word cannibal when these things are different species. That's another thing, is cannibal. That's usually human eating human, and not a monster eating. But is that again European colonial translation errors, and they're just, because they were people eaters, that they would just say, well, they're cannibals because they're people eaters. But
yeah, I would think so, because I mean, unless they
the real definition of go ahead. Sorry.
If they looked like strikingly human, I could see the tribes going, oh, they're cannibals. But if you look at the way they described them, though, they wouldn't use the term cannibal. I think that is definitely like, the European settlers and everything bringing their dialect to the tribes.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think it's like man eaters and stuff. Man eaters. Maybe was a mistranslation into cannibal, because cannibal does reference, same species eating and stuff. So, but are they again considering some of these giant Native Americans or giant humanoids that were, speaking the same languages and human enough that they were considering cannibals?
There is that possibility too, though, that like in the case of the Otne Yarhe, the Janoskwa, that they saw them actually eating their own kind, but they were also man eaters as well. And maybe when they were, just describing this to the settlers and everything, they just took the word cannibal, said, oh, they're cannibals, nothing more. Because when I've spoken to people about the Janoskwa, they would say they're cannibal man eaters. So there's kind of like a separation, cannibal, man eater. So they were kind of implying there that, they ate their own kind, but then they also stalked humans.
I believe the Paiute story with the Paiute princess in the 1800s who wrote the story said that they would eat their own dead and stuff.
Yeah.
And they would also eat the Paiute.
Yes.
And they would be cannibals and stuff. And I hope that's not Bigfoot. I really hope it's not Bigfoot, because I don't want to get out there chasing some man-eating cannibal thing. Like, what are we doing?
Well, I mean, stop and think for a moment, though. I mean, Bigfoot would be opportunistic, would it not? I mean, sure, it can eat berries and leaves and whatever is out in nature or in the wild. But I don't know, man. If I were a Bigfoot and I saw a stout little human being, I might be like, that looks like good eating right there. So
I think it happens. I think they're smart enough to know there's consequences, there's risks to reward, and I think some individuals and some family groups have more than once decided to take risk. And
could be why the number of human attacks by Bigfoot are going down. If you look at the Iroquois tales of the Janoskwa, they were so abundant in number, they were just coming down almost every night to take people from the village until muskets arrived. And then suddenly, they learned, oh, these muskets can break through our armor. It's time to get away from here. So maybe there's something to that.
Yeah, exactly. You don't hear, like I said, we're not encountering any of the cryptids anymore that the natives were supposedly encountering. And some colonials supposedly encountered specifically like, lake monsters and river monsters and swamp things. And all the
kind of makes you wonder, though, did the settlers maybe wipe some things out when they came over here? I mean, there was a lot of big game hunters there. They like trophies.
But we don't hear no
So
stories about it. But at the same time, it seems like the modern government is definitely keeping a wrap on Bigfoot and possibly any other weird cryptids that are out there, or paranormal stuff too.
true.
There must be a reason for it, and I would think it's more than a flesh and blood animal that is comparable to like a grizzly bear, and
Yeah.
that's like
Yep.
a monster already, right? All right, so this
Right.
book is the grandfather book, and I'm going to butcher the name, but Missos. I should have listened to the person read the book and to
Mishomis.
get the names, but the Shomus book, yeah, the grandfather book, the voice of the Ojibwa or Ojibwe, depending on how you want to pronounce it and how it's spelled, by Edward Benton Banney. Or Bonnie.
Very nice.
He is or was a Native American activist and elder of I believe this was a Wisconsin reservation tribe.
Would be correct.
Yes. Okay. And so here's an acknowledgement, of course, of some of the elders and stuff, I believe, that were on the maybe you can pronounce that better since you're a little bit French.
Can you enlarge it a little bit? So
I can. It's a little hard. Let me. I can make it full screen.
There you go.
It's the Lac Court e Oris.
Yeah, you got it.
And basically, these are. It's kind of hard, practicing some of these French names and Native American names and switching back to English.
So this is basically you're telling me
an acknowledgement of some of the elders from the reservations into the book. So it's not some crackpot bull crap story put out by some ex-tribal member that means nothing, right? This is a book that's filled with the teachings and the creation stories and the stories right here, actually, like the Great Flood. But the story we're going to take a look right now is Wanajabo or Nanajabo. Depending on how westward, eastward, essential you get, the name changes to an N or a W-A-Y or N-A-Y or N-A-N. Nanajabo is usually how I pronounce it because I was taught and studied Potawatomi more than Ojibwa. So that's how I usually pronounced it, is Nanajabo. So we're going to go over to page 36, 42 or something like that, I think it is. And so this is what he encounters, and this is what's in the book right here.
There you go.
Nanajabo's journey. When he goes to the Redwoods, he encounters a Bugajawinian. And I had to practice that a little bit.
I bet.
So in this, basically Nanajabo dozes off, and he wakes to someone or something had prodded him. He looks around slowly, even though he did not see anything. He knew he was not alone. Suddenly, he noticed that out of his direct eyesight, there was a being, a huge dark figure with red eyes that peered out of a shadowy face. And I thought that was very interesting. And there's other stuff. Long story short, he basically feels like he has the feeling of violence, the feeling of fighting, which was unknown in the world at that time. And so Nanajabo basically controls his fear, that new strange sensation. And the creature begins to speak is, I am Bugajawinian, wild man. Some of the people who follow you will know me as Sasquatch or Yeti, but they will seldom see me. It will be forbidden for them to look into my eyes. Some will not ever know of me. Many will not believe that I exist. I am your eldest brother.
Wow.
And already right there, it's like, as a Bigfoot researcher and stuff, it's like, this is like some of the Holy Grail stuff. It seems like it's like, what? It's
absolutely.
Like, yeah, got to contact these elders and these tribes and figure out, is this the actual quote from the Bugajawinian talking about Sasquatch or Yeti, or is that what the elders are putting in as this is because it's kind of confusing at that point. It's like,
well,
they really
if I had to guess,
Sasquatch and Yeti, and I'm
if I had to guess, I'd say that's like that's a modern day quotation, because I mean, using Yeti, it seems very unlikely.
Yeah, exactly. but it's fascinating that the elders and they're putting this information into the book and they're acknowledging it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, he quoted as saying, some of you will know me as something else, or, know something, obviously this was important enough to be put in the book and acknowledged by all these elders. So,
What's really interesting though, is they speak of the red eyes, but they speak of it in a positive way. Because a lot of tribes will tell you to avoid the red eyes.
Yeah, in this one, this is a full positive encounter, actually. And so basically, he says, I've been with you on your journey. I've been ahead of you at times and behind you at times. Sometimes I've watched you walk by. The Creator sent me here to guide and care for those who become lost, and to watch over those who go into the forest, swamps, hills, and mountains to gather medicine and other things. If those who seek the medicine, roots, bark, and berries will ask me in a good way, if their thoughts are good and their concern is for others, I will help them find the medicine they seek. I shall know their thoughts. I am also to help those who choose to meditate, pray, and fast in the wild and natural places. Of course, he says, I am the caretaker of all these places, the deep forests, swamps, mountains, deep valleys. And then this is when he describes like his people. He says, I am natural man. I am to be different, to be the different one, different in all ways. I should not build a home or gather in towns, nor will I assemble with my own kind in tribes or nations.
Wow.
I will make no trails, nor will I build canoes. I am to be alone in quiet solitude and majesty of the natural world of the Creator. I shall know of man's presence, and I will know his thoughts. But only the Anishinaabe shall know me. I am not to desire companionship of the Anishinaabe or others. Only the Anishinaabe shall know and honor me.
Oh. That kind of hits home, doesn't it?
That's a lot to unpack. And this story is, hundreds to thousands and thousands of years old. And he's talking about, my people will not gather or assemble when I build homes.
Right.
Will not desire companionship of the Anishinaabe, which were, the northern woodland tribe.
Yeah, they were the watchers, man.
Yeah. And, it's very fascinating that this story is thousands of years old, and it's like describing modern Bigfoot-like behavior. It's like, oh, they don't make trails. Well, they don't seem to assimilate. Well, they don't gather.
Yep.
Well, they definitely don't desire companionship with us.
That's why I find this stuff so fascinating, man. When you read these older tales, like everything's so spot on that you have to go, okay, why is this so accurate, and how is this so accurate? So you have to really look into those.
Even this imagery of the red eyes that are glowing and stuff. And this book was produced in 1979, I believe. And I think the imagery, the red eye shine, that stuff wasn't as big back then and known about. 1979. No. I mean, internet wasn't out. There's not a lot of communication spreading the glowing red eyes aspect. But this Native American tribe of course, has the story from thousands of years old. It says, "Oh yeah,
it's a treasure trove, man. I'm telling you."
And it talks about like mind speaking. He shall know his thoughts, and they converse. Like right here, it says, Nanojabo did not need to voice his thoughts as he visited with the Bogajawinian, and they conversed through the night. So he didn't need to voice his thoughts as he visited, but they conversed through the night. Well, how can you do that?
Mind speak.
So, and so he says, little brother, I've watched you on your journey. I've known your thoughts. I tell you of the things that he has wondered. And he talks about when it comes to, you should always treat the natural creation with respect. You must if you must come through my territory, honor those places with tobacco and good thoughts. And good thoughts is another occurrence with this like mind speaking. He says it will help you if your thoughts is the concern for others and stuff. Yeah. I just find that very fascinating. Very fascinating stuff. And basically, he goes on and talks about time and how time is basically only relevant here in a creation of the creator, and gets into more spiritual aspects and stuff. And
of course,
but he says, when you go into their territory, his territory, be not in fear, and that you shall not be lost or confused, and no harm will befall you. Be always in wonder in all the wonder works that you see. They're the hand and thought of the creator, Manitou.
Manitou.
Yeah, you know how many different Native American clans and tribal families pronounce this stuff differently? It's crazy. Even
I know.
some Ojibwe, the Ojibwe themselves, it's like this clan or Eagle clan talks differently than their clan, and sometimes I find that they're leaving a story like the Seven Teachings has the representation of Sabe as the honesty, but in some family tribes or clans, I guess, they would say that Raven teaches them honesty. And so there's a whole different stories going on. And I'm not sure if sometimes that's to keep more sacred information like this sacred, because it seems like, we're not hearing a bunch of stories about this. I mean,
true, very true. I think in some cases I think they do omit certain things in some cases because they want those stories to be held dear and sacred. They want it to be important, not mocked.
I think this is one of the cases and stuff, and this is why it's not talked about. I remember reading, stories about Nana Jabot back in my younger days, but I never recall this golden nugget of information. And it's just right there in the middle of a book. And it's like, and it doesn't matter because it's not that important to them. And it's just another very small part of the search for his father. And that's just one small little part. And then he moves on and it continues. And it's like, wait, let's go back here. What's this? What are these? We need more information. And, but that's it. And that's he talks to Nana Jabot as, I'm your elder brother, and of course his people. And that makes me think, if there are people, maybe that Bugajewinian was the equivalent of that cultural hero or significant. If there were people and stuff, and it sounded like they had pretty good honesty and a way of conducting themselves, that didn't seem like they were cannibal giants bent on destruction to Native American. But do you think as a people, maybe, they have their own separate issues and lives, and, sometimes bad things, bad people, bad
absolutely
can be born and things happen. When I hear people, I think, I hear struggle. I hear, the heart, the war of the heart and stuff like that. So when I hear people, I do hear, well, there's good people, there's bad people, there's all sorts of things going on. Do you think maybe that's where you hear the cannibal giant, some of these stories? I know going back to this, 100%. But after hearing this, what do you think about this story? And after hearing this, does it just reconfirm some of the stuff you've already heard?
I think this is an amazing story, and I'm really happy that you stumbled upon it. And I think people could really learn from this. There's a lot to be taken away, but for your question about the different, the attitudes, I definitely think that's a possibility. I think there's some that could be timid. There's some that could be shy. There's some that could be just totally aggressive and not like us one bit. And I think in a way that story kind of touches upon that too, because we do disrespect nature. Humans in general.
A lot. Oh, yeah.
We're totally tearing it down. We're messing it up. We're hurting Earth more than anybody else. And I think, they have to see that, and they see us cutting down trees and hunting animals, over hunting animals. And I think sometimes that causes aggression to stir up in them, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I think so. And this is the Grandfather book. Of course, you can find this on Amazon. We have a question right here by our Garlip. Is a sincere question. How do you know these old stories are accurate?
Oh, see now with the tribal stories, the tribal stories, they're very, very sacred to the people. Okay. So when they hand the stories down, they're not really going to change a lot or add a lot to it. They're going to tell it to them like how their grandfather told them and his grandfather told him. It's a very important thing that they hand down the stories exactly as they originally were told. They don't like to add or embellish. They want to have the kids, the future generations, know the story of how their ancestors told it. So for me,
Exactly.
that shows that they're very accurate.
Exactly. And a lot of stories, I'm guessing, are sacred, are not being spoke about. And we do hear references to, that these stories are only told in rituals or their religious ceremonies and stuff, and only to the tribal members and elders who are becoming elders and stuff. Like there's only, I've heard that, there's only information told to people who are going to be, the next runner up to carry on and running the things around, like those reservations or those groups and stuff. And some of the stories from I can't remember. It was the picture of the Sasquatch on the rock, the rock painting. I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
It's from a northern Californian tribe, I believe. I can't remember the. It's not the Thule. It's I can't remember. I just look it up.
You're drawing a blank.
Yeah, trying to remember different tribal names and stuff. Sometimes it's a blur.
It takes a lot, man. Let me tell you.
But basically, it's a picture of a lot of Bigfoot researchers say, it's a Bigfoot on a rock, and it's the Native American story. Of course, Kathy String put it in her book of the creation story of Wild Man is discussing to other animals and to coyote. When they create the humans, it needs to walk on its hind legs like me, like a wild man. And coyote says, no, it needs to walk on four legs. Of course, they race. The Bigfoot or the wild man cheats. When the people are created, they walk on two legs like this, the wild man. They look upon the wild man's face, and he is so scary that they run away in fear, and he is depicted as crying on this rock because of that. Yeah. And Kathy Strain came out with her book and interviewed elders from this tribe. After the book came out a couple years, they produced a book on their tribal website and changed the story from this wild man creature to grizzly bear. And then, and to me, it's like they wanted that to, they felt they were getting bad publicity. Obviously, they were in question. I think it was a little bit of news stuff going on. They felt disrespected by what Kathy put out. They downplayed some of the stories they told her as they were just a kid version of stories. And I think some of that, what happened was, it pissed the tribal people off. Some of them didn't like some of the stories were being told maybe in such a way, or association with Bigfoot with their other entities. And it was Maya-Daktoch was the name of the rock, I believe, and the name of the creature. I still can't find the rock itself, but they got mad, and that because he's a sacred entity, he's this very religious sacred entity whose real name is so sacred that it's not spoke about outside of these ceremonies and stuff. So they were very pissed off, and I feel like that's pretty much.
Oh yeah, they hold a lot of stuff close to the vest. They really do. Some things are just so completely taboo. Yeah, some things are just completely taboo where they will not speak of it ever. Or if they can at least avoid it, they'll avoid talking about it. So
what are some other cryptids and stuff that you feel are misrepresented? I know you've talked about the Gugways and the Junasquas, and sometimes they have dogman snouts, so they're dogman creatures, obviously, or they're
right.
I've heard they say, they're just the meaner Bigfoots and stuff, obviously. Well, what information is there to even conclude some of this stuff? Like, are people just pulling this stuff off their asses? Are there internet telephone games going on with all these stories and cryptids? Are there new, just made
I
up
think
cryptids
people will get mad at this, but I do think a lot of it is because people want that good horror story. Because if you remember, like 10 years back, how often was a Gugwe at all? not comment at all, right? Now you got people coming out the woodwork saying, oh, I ran into a Bigfoot, but it was a Gugwe, or I ran into this and it was a Gugwe. And it's so like, it's, telephone, tell a friend. I think a lot of people are adding to stories, and I think they're embellishing them greatly. Yeah, I think that's the case with Dogman too. I think all these horrific, violent sightings that we're getting at Dogman aren't as bad as they really sound. There you go. That's it right there.
Yes, this is the picture rock kind of stuff of the Maya touch, I believe is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone thinks, well, this is the Bigfoot. Obviously, it's right there. It's clear as day. And the tribe used to say, told the creation story, and this was the representation of him crying, is what they said. Of course, in 2008 or 2009, they came out with a book that said grizzly bear, was that creation story. And, they don't like talking about this. In fact, if you make prints, or you're actually not even supposed to show the rock off, or because it's such a religious artifact to them that they feel like it's disrespected for us Bigfooters to like put this on a banner and use it for our purposes and stuff. It's disrespectful.
I would agree.
I feel like that's why they've shut down pretty much talks about this. And I know Trey the Explorer actually reached out to them and tried to get information. And it seems like, to me, in my opinion, they're downplaying everything now because of the stuff they came across with Cat's Strain, the disrespect.
Take a look at how like, skinwalkers and Wendigo are treated. People deviate so far from the original oral traditions and the tales of it that we've done the same thing with Bigfoot. And I wouldn't blame any of the tribes for going, you know what, we're going to downplay it. We're going to keep it from you because you don't know how to respect us. I think that's their bold move, and it's the right move for them. Until we can start respecting their tales, we shouldn't be telling them.
I think actually that's exactly right. You hit the nail right on the head. It's exactly right. They feel disrespected, and they don't want their stories to be talked about and trashed, misrepresented, and then retold on the internet for other people to make money and to blemish. And it's
these stories and everything. It's just they're very important to them. They hold it closer than most treasures. Okay. So when we're making money off of their stories, they're sitting there going, well, how do you know? Who do you hear this from? This is our thing. Why are you making money off of our belief? And I think they're absolutely right in their stance on that. I support them 100%.
Same. Because, they're the keepers of information stuff. If they're holding on to more stuff, that's even more, would say, just fantastical than what's already been put out. How are we supposed to receive that when we're already trashing everything else? And or just trying to look after Bigfoot and go after Bigfoot. And some probably would say that's disrespectful to always be chasing after Sasquatch or Bigfoot or going after these things.
Yeah, definitely they would. I've been told that by Navajo people here in Arizona that chasing him is disrespectful. If you're meant to see him, he'll show himself to you in his own due time. So,
and that's what I've heard a lot, and from different tribes. It seems like when the time is right and their choice, they will let themselves be known. And until then, it's not going to happen.
Right? You can't force it.
It seems to be, and I've chased after these things. I've been stupid, try to do stupid stuff. And it honestly is like that. If you don't force it and you just let them do what they want, more often than not, things happen. Things seem to happen a lot more that way than
if you're meant to see it, the universe will play a part and you'll see it.
I think so. And I think a lot of us are going to get to that point where we're going to get more evidence and see them and stuff. And what do you think is what do you think the government's part in this? Why do you think they're keeping everything under wraps so much?
I know there's people that want me to say there's a big cover up going on, but I think in a way, I think they're trying to conserve the species. Okay. They don't want us going out there with our guns and our itchy trigger fingers and just shoot Bigfoot, and just kill them all. And then species is gone. I think in their own shady sort of way, they're trying to prevent us from murdering them.
That definitely is the more benign aspect. I hope so, because it does seem like here in Michigan, there's information that the DNR definitely knows about them. They're managing them. They're managing the areas that they're in. They know about them. It seems like that's what they're doing because they're not out there hunting them, putting traps out. Out there with you hear the military stories. Well, they're out there with the Rangers or the Delta Force, and it's like that stuff's not really happening. I don't think too much. Maybe right? I'm sure if you have bad Sasquatches, you got to do something, but it seems like there's a pretty good balance of management and cooperation with the species itself. Do you think, like I've speculated, do you think like there's negotiations and tribal councils where the Bigfoots are talking to the government and like, because why is there so much like balance and cooperation with the species and government managing them and there's no conflicts, there's no like raids on modern civilization, there's no whole group of Sasquatch raiding a small town and a bunch of houses, and nothing's on the news. There's nothing going on like sometimes in the back, the old stories of whole villages being torn apart by giants or cannibals or whatever entity.
Well, I mean, I think you could be right. I think that you could be, they could be speaking to tribal members because the tribes know how to handle them better than we do, I'm sure. I mean, they used to have to share terrain with these guys. They used to share their homes with them. So if anybody's going to know how to handle Bigfoot, even a rogue Bigfoot, this would be the tribal councils. They're going to know what to do and how to reach it and how to maybe satiate it so it stops doing what it's doing. That's my belief.
Yeah, I'm having trouble just figuring out because it's a mystery. It's such a fascinating mystery. Like
everything's a mystery right now.
Almost it is. Everything seems like it. So what's other stuff you want? I don't know how long you want to go on for. I don't know how long I got you for, but what's some other stuff that you wanted to get into that is maybe on your mind about the misrepresentation of Native American stuff or any other topic?
I'm going to go here. I'm sure anybody who knows me knows I'm going to go here right now. It's the skinwalkers. Okay. I am so tired of all these people labeling everything as a skinwalker. If they see a skinny white strange creature, they're like, oh, it's a skinwalker. Or if they hear a noise, it's a skinwalker. This isn't how the Yee-Natalushi operate, okay? You actually have to be in certain areas for this to be a genuine Navajo skinwalker, okay? If you're not within the 4 sacred mountains, okay, it can't be a Yee-Natalushi because they need those 4 sacred mountains. And I think people got to start looking into this too. You're not going to find information too readily available, and the Navajo aren't going to talk to you about it too easily. I mean, I get some information from them, but because I've been working at it for a long time, but they need to be exact because when you're labeling everything as a skinwalker, you're disrespecting their beliefs yet again. You're making fun of it. You're mocking it. And people need to start looking into this. Don't just label, oh, a bobcat noise is a skinwalker. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do the research, know what's out there, and actually try to talk to Navajo or even tribal people and get some facts about the skinwalkers before you label everything a skinwalker.
Yeah, they consider it a very serious matter. It's more of a witch than anything, or or an evil, or a person who just basically, sells the soul for evil magic and then does a horrific act, like kill a family member, wear their skin, or sometimes it's very similar to satanic Illuminati stuff that supposedly is going on now. You hear this very similar stuff.
Well, see, that's the modern internet version. Okay.
I was going to say, is that modern misinterpretation? What is the original stories? Because I think the original stories talk about evil witchcraft and how you can become, but there's
So modern in the original tradition, in the original stories, what a Yee-Natalushi is, it's a shaman that kind of turns to the dark side. I like to compare them to Jedi and Sith in a way. So when you're a normal shaman, you're the Jedi, right? But you learn about these powers that you could have. It's all about greed. It's all about self-gain. And so that shaman will go ahead and he'll kill somebody that's very close to him, be it a wife, a mother, a brother, a child. And once he's done that, he's initiated into the order that is the Yee-Natalushi. And they have this dark ceremony where the ones before him, they all sit in a circle in this designated cave that's important to that sect. and they'll be surrounded by mounds of human flesh and decapitated humans, and they'll do chants for days upon days upon days upon days. And according to the stories, once these chants are done, he now has the power to find a pelt and put his magic into these pelts. And when he wears those pelts, he can become an animal. Now, I'm not saying he becomes a dogman, okay? He doesn't become a Bigfoot. He doesn't become a werewolf. He becomes the literal animal, okay? Because Yinaralushi, translated into English, means by means of it, on all fours he goes. There's the key word, fours. So they're talking about him walking on all fours like an animal. So no, he's not going to become a werewolf. He's not going to become, like even a Mothman kind of thing. He's going to become a coyote,
Right.
or, a bear or a wolf, but he's becoming the actual animal itself.
Exactly. And a lot of the Skinwalker Navajo stories are expanded to like all Native American tribes believed that, when it's not really the case. The Skinwalkers is really a Navajo, a Great Plains kind of witch story. When you go into like the East Coast or West Coast, they don't really talk about Skinwalkers in that sort of way, but they do have witchcraft. They do have stories. But what about like stories about like dog soldiers that supposedly were Native Americans that transformed into dogman that fought the colonials or fought Native Americans in their times?
See, that story is very, very untrue. It's very untrue, because these dog soldiers, they didn't transform into animals. They wouldn't even be highly regarded. If they changed into animals like that, they'd be like, yeah, no, you're bad, go away. They were just very fierce and very determined warriors. And with the tribes, like they'll say you're as determined as a dog. It's because you're so aggressive and you lock your jaws onto it. That's where the term dog soldiers came from. Not because they turned into werewolves or they were skinwalkers, but because of how they were determined and how aggressive they could be in battle.
Right, because you have the stories of, the dog soldiers fought colonials and they were just Native Americans, but then the stories, they transformed into the dog man or the werewolves, and then, and I think some of that's the colonial mixed mash of stories and warfare at the same time.
Well, with the skinwalkers especially, what happened is they interwove a lot of different lore into the Navajo beliefs, so you had the European werewolves, and they just kind of, they dropped it in, they peppered it up and, made it more of a horror story.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, they're contained with those 4 mountains and stuff. And then what is the dog man? I mean, I've seen a wolf cross the road and stand up and run on its hind legs like a person. I have no idea what that is, other than it is a normal looking wolf. It never got up. It was a normal animal. Got up and ran like a person. What are people seeing? What did I see? Is there, because there's no Native American connection in Michigan with dogmans unless you shamanistic shape-shifting stuff, but there's no talk usually of those stories of, like you said, they're normal animals. Are not a deer that gets up and it's on its hind legs and is using its arm, or it's not like anything like that. So what are we encountering? Is this a new entity? Is this an old Native American spiritual thing? What is it?
If I could answer that, I would be rich. Okay. I honestly don't know what dogmen are. I don't know where they come from. I've seen one myself. I saw the hyena type. To this day, I still can't answer what it was or where it came from. I kind of think that, like Bigfoot, they could be interdimensional. I think they're solid, they're flesh and blood when they're here, but then they go back to wherever they came from. And that's why we're not finding them like we hope to.
My thing is, if it is like that, then it's spiritual, right? And then I don't get into the spiritual stuff because it's too easy to not recognize the darkness side of things, or the darkness is always trying to trick you or put you into like calm sense of, it's okay, come over here. And I just, if everything's interdimensional and spiritual and we're always chasing them and we're never getting answers, in the back of my mind there's this dark feeling of, this is the dark veil, and you're just trying to push into it, and there's nothing there besides the darkness, and it's all connected. And I would really
careful
hope
how
that
long you
it's not
stare
the
into the
case,
darkness,
man.
though.
Right. I hope that's not the case. What's your sense? I know you said you think it's all kind of connected and stuff. Do you think this is evil thing? There's different sides. What's your aspect on that?
I wouldn't say evil. I wouldn't say evil at all, but I do have to wonder if there's kind of like a tulpa like effect going on here. And I don't really want to use the word tulpa because that's too strong of a word, but we'll just say tulpa like for the sake of conversation. But maybe people are thinking about this stuff so much and they're so obsessed with it that our thoughts are giving form through energy. It's giving form to these things. And that's why we see them cloak. That's why we see them disappear. That's why they seem bulletproof, because they're not the real flesh and blood deal. There's some kind of manifestations.
And that could explain why there's so many cryptids in modern times that weren't talked about in a lot of folklore traditions of really a lot anywhere in the world and stuff,
I mean, you got like the knot deer, the knot deer just showed up not too long ago. And it's like, where did these things come from? I mean, was it because we were confusing the Wendigo and we thought, oh, well, it's a Wendigo we're seeing, but then we realized it wasn't. So we named it knot deer. What's going on here?
Right. And I think because sometimes the Wendigo has, antlers or a deer skeleton with antlers. And sometimes it's just a skeleton. That's emaciated, just a starving skeleton. Other times it's a giant, maybe hairy, but giant monster.
In some cases, it's a human being that got corrupted by the Wendigo.
But yeah, it's spiritual. And some even there's a story about a baby Wendigo. A baby gets transformed into a Wendigo, and then
usually curse.
Usually it was by a witch, wasn't it?
Yes.
Or shaman, I guess, evil shaman. And in those stories, when you kill the Wendigo, sometimes you have to destroy the ice heart. Sometimes you have to burn it, but it melts, or the body melts away, and the original human's left over, or a skeleton's left over, or sometimes it's just ice.
Right. Exactly.
And we're not encountering these modern creatures in winter and stuff.
No.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because we're not thinking about that? We didn't believe enough in it, like the Topa thing, where it's spiritually can't affect us because as a people, we just never believed in it?
I think in the case of the Wendigo, I think what it is it's bound to a certain area. I think the entity, I don't want to call it a demon, I'll just call it an entity. I think that entity is bound to a certain part of the world, and it has to stay there because that's where the belief originated from. So that where it's, in a way, that's where it met its origin. That's where it began. So I think it has to stay there. And I don't think we fear the Wendigo as much as we used to. I think back in the day, the Algonquin and the Cree and the Ojibwe, they were terrified of it. They didn't even want to speak its name. That when winter showed up, they were like, Wendigo's coming. And they were, just terrified, altogether terrified. And I think that fear has kind of just watered itself down as we got weaponry and we got homes and we got fast food. I think it really just kind of winded down a little bit.
Yeah, we're not starving out all that much like what used to happen. A lot of, winter was pretty bad and you would starve. Villages would starve. And that's where the Wendigo, of course, would happen a lot more. And we don't have starvation as much.
Right, exactly.
Obviously here. Fantastic stuff. And it just makes me wonder, how much more stuff's really out there, especially the lake monsters and stuff. We haven't got into that, but that's some of the stuff that really scares me. I'm not a big guy who wants to go out in the middle of a lake and go swim in and try to find a lake monster and stuff like that. I'm good. I'd rather chase.
I'll swim in the ocean to a certain extent. I won't go in above my shoulders in the ocean, but don't get me near a lake. I'm not going in a lake. No way. You can't see the bottom. You can't see the bottom in a lake, man.
Oh man, a lot of lakes and stuff, are usually dirty and muddy, and it's one of those things that you hear a lot of stories of, people drowning. Or what's your take on the missing 411 stuff? Do you think that's any one thing? Do you think it's some Native American cryptids? Do you think it's more modern stuff? you think it's the Earth itself doing crazy stuff?
I think it could be all the above, but I also think that it's also other humans. I mean, the worst thing to run into out in those woods is a bad person, because you never know what they're going to do to you. I don't really think it's too much cryptid based. I really don't. Because, I mean, the folded clothes, the shoes that were taken off, what they have manners where they're like, oh, before I kill you, can you remove that shirt and fold it nicely and take off those shoes too, because they look expensive. I don't see cryptids doing that. So I think it's feral people. Yeah, I think it's feral people. I think it's, stumbling upon illegal grow fields of certain drugs. And I think some people just have bad intentions. I think there's certain people that take others out there just to harm them. So,
yeah, I definitely think there's probably a lot more serial killers out there running around loose than publicly acknowledged and not known about.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing stuff. Do you have anything else? Do you want to share, talk about, or raffle some feathers? I know we've kind of covered pretty much, I think, everything I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, we did. Well, I will say it once again, though. So TikTokers and Instagram people, stop labeling everything as a skinwalker. Do some research. It's going to be like G.I. Joe. Look into it, and you're going to have the more you know. And knowing's half the battle. So please do the research and stop disrespecting the Navajo beliefs.
Exactly. And well, again, the problem is, a lot of Native American stories about witchcraft and stuff, you don't hear about them, but you have the Navajo skinwalker witches, which are, so popular that it's generalized and stuff. Have you heard of
the funny part is, though, people that can't even pronounce the real name. They never called them skinwalkers. Nowhere in their history did they say, oh, they're skinwalkers. No. They're Yinaralushi. That's how they refer to them. They never, ever once called them skinwalkers.
Yeah, there's a reason why I don't call them by that, because it's too hard to pronounce, and you have to keep practicing it and stay at it. But I might learn that word from now on, because see, my problem was I'm heavily studied like the Anishinaabe tribal stuff, and not so much all the other tribes as much as I want to. But I do remember reading, I believe, and hearing from Southwest Plains tribes, maybe the Apache and stuff. They say how and stuff. There's a story about them doing this to check to see if you have 5 digits or 6 digits.
Yes, that's correct.
If you have 6 digits, you were of this other race of what they said were evil people, and they would kill them off outright. Sometimes they were described as giants and stuff. Now, to me, that kind of sounds like Nephilim, 6-handed giants, double rows of teeth type of description.
Yep. Correct. Correct.
So you are familiar with that story. What do you know what tribe that was? Was that from the Apache or this?
Yeah, that's the Apache
region, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's the Apache. Definitely.
And it's stuff like that. It makes me really wonder. Well, it's all archived up here. It's just sometimes it's like wiping the dust off a little bit. Is the names correct?
Yeah, it's not like a computer where you can punch in a keyword on your brain and it brings up all the different options for you.
Well, reading all this stuff back when the internet was not so censored, and you could find all these information, and used to have the websites, and now it seems like when I'm trying to find these stories and look for Bigfoot, I had a little bit hard time finding these older stories, but I did come across new stuff, which I'm glad. Why do you think that is? Do you think is there censorship going on, or is it's just the old internet dying off? There's just not much you can do.
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's like we discussed earlier. I think a lot more of the tribal nations are sitting up and saying, look, if you're not going to respect our stories, don't tell them. I think that, the old internet is kind of dying off, where, the sites that had them are now shut down, because people just didn't want to take care of them anymore. So I think it's more than one thing.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. I think we're going to shut it down here. I'd love to have you on again and stuff. I think we'll try to get maybe a group discussion going on about different stuff, but also have you on to talk about your encounters and stuff, because I know you hinted at a few. And I would love to get into more on that, and we can do that in another show.
You set it up. I'll be here.
I will. We'll do it in maybe a month's time or so. Give it a little bit of time.
Okay. All right. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks for joining, and hope you have a wonderful night, Ryan.
You too. Have a great night, everybody.
All right. And I hope everyone enjoyed. Hopefully we got to everyone's question. I'm sorry if I missed it. I wasn't paying attention to chat and stuff. Just a lot of great information from Ryan and stuff. And check out, I should have asked him and stuff to check him out if he has any website and stuff. You can find Ryan on Facebook. He's in a lot of good groups. He's posting. He's been doing a lot of good interviews and stuff recently. You can find that out. But you can find him on Facebook, Ryan Paul Tremblay. I'm sure you can find him in a lot of different groups and stuff. So check him out. Good information. Great guy. Really knows some stuff. And I'm really interested to find out what kind of encounters he had. So we're going to do a little bit more interviews with people, with guests coming on, talking about their encounters and their opinions on different sorts of topics concerning Bigfoot and cryptids and stuff. So we're kind of switching gears and stuff, going from different topics and jumping back into having people on. So if you want to come on the show, you can email me right here, or contact me on Facebook, the Lost Cryptids Conservatory Facebook page, Facebook group. Of course, you can find me posting away on a bunch of different groups like I did today. So contact me if you have any evidence, especially Michigan-based reports or evidence that you want to share or you want to talk about. You don't have to come on the show. Email me, contact me. Next weekend, next weekend we're not going to have a show because we're going to be out in the field. We might try to go live, depending on if we have service. We might try to go live from in the field for a little bit. We're going to an active area, of course, where we got 37 knocks. We're going to try to get more activity during the day, like what happened with me and James. The tree pushed over. So next weekend we're going to go be camping with the group, with the guys, and so we won't be doing a normal show. I think we'll go live if we can. Should hopefully come back, maybe with nothing, maybe with some stories. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm always excited when we go out, so be on the lookout for that. Check out Nikki's show tomorrow. It's going to be a good one, I believe. And I'll put the links in the chat, in the description later if you want to donate and stuff and help out with some equipment fund. We are about to get together a long duration audio equipment that I'm about to start ordering the different stuff for and putting together. And then we're going to be putting that out in the field pretty much 24/7 until I have to take it in and get everything off of it. So pretty much we're going to go long-term audio duration, long-term audio recordings and stuff. And we're going to try to go 24/7 as much as we can, and until we have to switch memory cards and stuff. Pretty much be able to get out there, put in some of these active areas, and leave it out there. And so we're going to have a lot of data coming in, a lot of audio stuff coming in. Might need some help. I don't know. I might just put everything on YouTube and stuff and just constantly download it to YouTube, and then everyone else can look at it at the same time that I do, because as I'm thinking of the amount of hours that are going to rack up each and every week, it's going to be a lot. So it's a pretty big undertaking. Pretty excited for it. So I hope everyone has a good night. God bless everyone. I hope you enjoy the show, and stay tuned because there's more to come.